Hey guys, welcome back to Ranger Survival and Fieldcraft. I'm Andrew, and what I have for you today is our last ditch winter survival kit. Stand by. High speed, low drag, not going anywhere for a while. Alright guys, welcome back. So what we're going to talk about today is a last ditch winter survival kit. Now the intent behind this kit is we want to postpone or put off the chances of going primitive and wasting a lot of energy, wasting a lot of hydration, and potentially increasing the risk factor in a survival scenario. And so this kit does that. It gives us the ability to get warm very quickly, so we're not walking around expending a lot of energy and calories and hydration trying to get primitive fire, get primitive shelter. And it's also going to decrease the risk factor of walking around rough terrain and potentially suffering some sort of injury to ourselves in a survival scenario. And now, our survival kit can be cheap, ready-made stuff that we can just put into a container like this coffee can or small coffee can like this with a lid, so we can purify water and travel with it. But we can put things in here that are around our area, maybe inside our medicine cabinet, inside our junk drawer, inside the garage. Maybe we have leftover hardware items from a recent move, whatever it is. But we can take those items and put them in here to make a last-ditch survival kit that will help protect us from the elements, keep us warm, keep us hydrated, provide a little bit of food, and then most importantly, signal for rescue to get out of that survival situation that we found ourselves in. Now this kit has a lot of goodies inside, but one of the things I like to pack in most kits is just another container. And this is just a quart-sized plastic bag. And we can take this bag with some of the tape inside our kit and turn this into an Arctic bag. Alright, so with a little bit of paracord and then some tape all the way around the bottom of the bag, or the entirety of the bag minus the Ziploc at the top, we have an Arctic bag. What this is just a military method for waterproofing our bags, because we all know that plastic bags can be easily compromised, but we have that tape around here to help protect it, to keep everything inside. And in this case, we're actually going to fill this up and use it as a container for liquid. And we just put snow inside. And now that we have our Arctic bag filled with snow, already starting to melt, we can take this bag with the lanyard over our head, act as a necklace, and just simply place it inside our coat, zip it up, and now our body heat will actively melt that snow so we can get a drink while we continue work out here. And the next thing we're going to need is shelter. Now for our shelter, we're going to go with a ridge pole as opposed to a ridge line, because we have limited paracord in here. But probably the best tool that we could throw in a last-ditch kit is just some sort of multi-tool. Now a ridge pole is just a straight stick, a branch or a sapling that we can cut down with our multi-tool. Every multi-tool that I possess and recommend is going to have a saw on it and the ability to take down small saplings like this one to turn it into ridge poles and shelter material. Something else we can have in our kit to help us with that cordage factor are just simple zip ties that we can take and use to lash our ridge pole up to our shelter structure. That way we're saving on cordage yet again. Now the two items inside our last ditch kit to establish a shelter or make a shelter with to protect from the elements and they stay warm through the night. It's going to be that cheap Mylar blanket and then a simple polyethylene sheet that we can use to make a super shelter. Now what I'm doing is taking the corner of our Mylar here, twisting it up to create just a simple overhand knot. Now once I have that knot through, taking another zip tie from our kit, I'm going to zip tie these anchors in place on our ridge pole to extend the top part of our shelter with our Mylar blanket. The knife on the multi-tool makes quick work of this little branch so we can fashion stakes that we're going to use to tie down or anchor our Mylar blanket to the ground. And then now what we can do with our Mylar to anchor it into the ground, take a little bit of our 550 cord and just make a simple attachment. We've got a jam knot so we can slide down on the corner of our tarp or our Mylar blanket here, and then just a end-of-line bowline on the other end to attach to our stake. As always, we want at least 4 inches of compressed debris on the forest floor. These cedar boughs are great for this because they're springy and they provide that insulation and that dead air space to keep us warm throughout the night. I hate this part. I'm a huge fan of the Morse-Kohansky Super Shelter. It's efficient, lightweight, and portable. The only downside is making this shelter work, especially in high winds. Now one thing we've done is folded the sheet in half as we wrapped it lengthwise around the shelter, and we can close off the ends with the remainder of our tape that we have. But one thing I did to help balance the sheet and keep it flat is taken a small rock and then placed it inside that fold. That way it'll act as an anchor for the shelter, or at least for the polyethylene sheet, to keep it taut against the wind and against the fire, to act as just a straight wall to allow that radiant heat from the flames to come in and keep the shelter warm while it reflects off of our Mylar. And this is our super shelter. Now, what I think we'll do is just build a modified Boy Scout fire lay here. The Boy Scout fire lay keeps the platform up off the ground, allows air to get into it, and then burns that material quickly so we can use that heat to boil water or melt snow in our coffee can. So we'll just take our sticks here and lay them out into a platform shape, and this will be our main platform with the rocks holding everything up. Then we'll take some smaller sticks and line them down here to act as just another simple platform to help that material to start eating all this fuel. And this little platform right here is where we're going to start our fire. I'm going to take the remainder of this stuff out and put it in my pockets, because we're going to take this container and fill it up with snow and put it over our fire so we can get some more water. But I realized that I haven't really gone over any of the items in this kit besides what you've seen me work with so far. But we have our paracord for that cordage. We got wire for snare wire, so we're going to use here in a little bit. We got bright orange surveyor's tape. I'm going to show you a sear technique with this on how to signal. We got our tape, a tea bag, and then our signaling mirror, our chow, Snickers bar. Got an emergency candle right here for our super shelter. We got chapstick, and we're going to need that for fire. We've got our lighter. I've left this out, so hopefully it's cold. There's a little bit of flame coming off of it, but not much. And then we've got 2 cotton tampons that we're going to use for fire, and then an emergency whistle for signaling. And that's it for our last ditch survival kit for winter survival. Take note of how I've removed my gloves to fill up the coffee can with snow. It's important to remember that keeping our clothing dry and taking care of ourselves as best as possible to avoid overheating or sweating or getting wet and compromising our clothes is incredibly important in winter survival. Now, we need to fill this thing up as far as it'll go. A lot of this will melt off or evaporate in the fire, and once this melts, we're going to have about that much water at the bottom. So we'll have to add more snow to get enough water to make a hot drink. Today. Now, if you look behind me, this big tree with the green on it looks like evergreen boughs almost. It's a red cedar. It's part of the juniper family. The junipers often produce berries, or at least the female trees do. We can grab those berries and we can take those berries, they're dried out this time of year typically, and then collect them up and put them in our tea just a little bit to add medicinal value. Now, juniper berries have been used for a long time by Native Americans to season deer meat, to put into hot drinks to help soothe the throat, a cough, and to treat stomach issues. But we want to be careful about eating wild edibles, especially if we don't know what it is. Luckily, this red cedar up here is part of the Virginia species, so we can use the berries in small amount inside our tea to add a little bit of medicinal value and a little bit of extra flavor to that tea. But we want to be careful. Don't over-consume juniper berries, because a lot of species tend to be toxic to humans and can cause an allergic reaction. So always be careful and 100% know that wild plant you're about to consume before consuming it. When in doubt, don't eat it. So here's our collection of juniper berries. You can see the little blue berries in here. We'll just use a couple in our tea to add a little bit of medicinal value and some flavor, but we're not going to use too much. All right, real quick before we get our fire started, let's see how our Arctic bag is doing. It was full, and there appears to be a little bit of water in there. You guys can see that, just a little bit. It's not a lot of water, but it is a sip, and the sip is better than nothing. All right, now for our fire. As we're getting ready to light here, we're going to use that tampon, 100% cotton, as our tinder source. We've got chapstick, the petrolatum or jelly in this that we can use as a flame extender. And then we've got our lighter, simple lighter. Really cold right now, but still works, that we're going to use to light this fire. All right, so we have our cotton right here, 100%. And in order to make this last longer to start a fire, you can use chapstick. It has that same hydrocarbon jelly on it. You just take some, push it in there, add a little bit more, goosh it into our cotton, even take a little bit, put it on our lips. Then all we have to do is light that now with our lighter and get our fire going. There you go. that wind's going pretty fast. Just gonna get this guy right in here now. Help melt our snow. Jeez. Now, because of the wind today, coming out of the north, moving south, we want to put our container on the side of the fire that's going to get the most flame. That way we melt that snow as fast as possible so we can rehydrate as fast as possible. Alright, so we'll add a little tea pack here. Start brewing up a nice cuppa. Even though we don't have any sugar or milk, we'll put in just a small amount of our juniper berries into our tea. We'll save the rest for later. Now we'll let our tea steep. Alright, so sitting here in our shelter, one of the benefits of folding that polyethylene sheet right here and then putting those rocks in as weights is that we can pick the sheet up and actually tuck it into our shelter, give us a little bit of workspace here. So, benefit of that. So we've got our tea, it's been steeping for a few minutes. You can definitely smell the citrus in the tea. It smells really good. Let's give it a shot. Okay. Kind of bland. Probably use some more berries, but I wanted to be on the safe side and just use a little bit so I don't have an allergic reaction or I don't get sick or anything. But really good flavor, really good aroma, but it's pretty good. So tea is done. I'm warming up the Snickers bar in my pocket and we'll have that for our meal. So I also got the Snickers bar because I'm recently reminded of my time in Iraq. We were there in during the surge from 2006 to 2007, and we were slotted to come home on a certain date and then end up getting extended 4 months as part of the surge to continue to run operations. We were out in Al Anbar province in Iraq, near Ramadi and Hit and Fallujah and Al Assad, TQ, all those places. And the Snickers motto at that time, I'll never forget this, the Snickers motto at that time was not going anywhere for a while. That became a running joke in our unit. Nice and hard. Now let's go over the remaining items in our kit. This is a smaller version of a survival candle, probably only going to last an hour or two, but we can take this, light it, put it inside our shelter to heat our shelter, or we can take this candle and, similar to things you've seen in the past from these videos, is take this candle, stick it in the ground, sit over top of it in between our legs, light it, and then wrap that Mylar blanket sheet around us and make an emergency shelter to stay warm or just get warm in. And that's a great method for staying warm. So a survival candle fits right inside this last ditch kit. Then we've got a whistle found in the junk drawer. We can take this, make a necklace, and just hang it around our neck or on our Arctic bag and wear it for an emergency signal. Always a big fan of signaling mirrors. This just happens to be one from inside a camo compact or face paint compact. And then that other signal item that we have is just some surveyor's tape. We can also take this and apply some sear methods to turn this into an epic signal. Okay, so we have our orange surveyor's tape here. All we have to do is hang it up at eye level along our route to either blaze a trail or leave as a sign for search and rescue. You just take it, obviously, and tie it up. And it'll hang there, floating freely in the breeze. Color, contrast, and movement, it's a good signal. Now, taking the liberty and written out a code already that you can see. All of these are generally search and rescue symbols. The first two at the top together forming one symbol are those upside down chevrons or wide V's. That indicates weapons and ammunition required. And then the number 1 going down indicates the number of survivors or isolated personnel, in this case just one, me. And then the sideways K, or the tilted K, is really just an arrowhead with a line drawn across the top as you see it, and that indicates direction traveled. And so you read that as you read the ribbon up to down. And then you have a triangle at the bottom which indicates safe to land here, or there is a landing zone somewhere nearby for aircraft. Now, of another note, quickly, is that you read this top to bottom. Typically, the most distressing signal is on top. In this case, I need some weapons and ammunition. And then going down, you have number of personnel in the area, 1. You have direction traveled. You read it as you look at the surveyor's tape, and then that landing zone is somewhere nearby, indicating that this place is safe or has some sort of landing zone nearby that will accommodate some sort of aircraft, typically a helicopter. Use a code, and now you have a high-speed, low-drag SEER symbol. And then lastly, in winter, you're not going to be able to fish very often unless you have something to break through the ice. And so we prioritize our last-ditch survival kit for things that are available to us. There's a lot of different rabbit tracks and small critter tracks all through here. And so we have just a nice spool of wire. This is just picture hanging wire that we can take. It's about 24 gauge or so. Take this and cut it up and actually form it into snares, and then set up snares in the area to attempt to catch some game. All right, so let's talk about wire really quick. I recommend having at least a few feet of wire, and then before you even go to the field with this wire, I recommend you cut it up into appropriate sections, because if you don't have a multi-tool, it's very hard to actually cut that wire and make it useful out in the wild without banging rocks together. But as a little trick, I'll show you how you can cut wire if you don't have wire cutters. Alright, so a trick to cut this wire down to length if you don't have your multi-tool or you don't have wire cutters or a way to actually cut this wire. Since it's 24 gauge and it's just picture hanging wire, it should be pretty easy for us to cut with something. And that something is the back of our knife, a 90-degree edge. So if you have a 90-degree edge on your utility knife or on your field knife, you should be able to cut this wire using a couple of different methods. Now, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid, but it's going to look stupid. So we take our wire with a piece of wood like this. It's something soft because that wood won't damage our knife, but we can take this and simply hit that wire a couple of times to damage the edge or damage the wire just a little bit, and then where we hit it, we should be able to simply bend it back and forth until it snaps. And then we have successfully cut that wire down to whatever length we need. The more you know. Now, simple method for making a snare is just find the end of our wire, fold it over top of a small stick like this, and you're going to want to go around twice. A little harder to do when your hands are cold, I guess. But you're going to want to go around twice on that little stick, and then just take the stick, and all you have to do is spin it while the wire wraps around itself, okay? Something like that. And then all you have to do is snap the stick, break it apart, free your loop, and then what you've created right there is a self-locking snare. And there are two kinds of snares. There are simple, and then there are self-locking when you're using just plain wire like this. But then you just feed the wire through the loop, And you have a ready-made snare right there ready to go. And one of the best ways to set up simple snares like this is with an L7 trigger. Alright, so for our L7 trigger, we're going to need 2 sticks. They can be the same size. One can be a little longer, one a little shorter. It doesn't really matter as long as they're generally straight and we can carve into these. Now what we want to do is take our saw from our Leatherman and just saw into both sticks. Something like that. From here we can use our utility knife and actually begin carving down into that notch, and that saw is going to give us that really clean cut. And this is 1/2 of our trigger, and we do the same thing on the other half. But before that, this one is, I think, a little longer than the other one, so we're actually going to shave this side down into a stake because this one's going to go in the ground. Something like that. I like to leave the bark on the back, keep it strong. Now because of that saw blade and that fine stop notch that we have right there, it means that the trigger right here can be set to a hairpin trigger, and when the snare is actually activated, it'll set off the spring pull and hopefully capture us some food. So we have our sapling right here that's going to be our engine for this snare. We want to pull it down, test it to see where the best angle is. Probably somewhere right over here is where we want to attach our paracord to it. And so we'll have our stake somewhere right in here where we can actually put the trigger and snare in place, have the spring pull set, and then let the game come through, get caught up in our snare, and then we've got food. Here's our stake. I'm just going to put it right on the ground. Nice and strong, so it's not going to be pulled out of there by our engine. We'll attach our paracord to our trigger and our snare as best as possible. We want to make sure we measure it over top of our stake. That way we know it's in the exact right place. Now typically we want to put these along game trails or where we've noticed game activity before. We find scat, we find digs, we find anything that indicates animal sign. That's where we want to put this. But for the demo, we're just going to do it right here to demonstrate how this thing works. Set the snare along what would be our trail, just for example's sake. Now all we have to do is wait for the animal to come through here. He goes through the noose, pulls, 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 activates, and we've got game in the trap. There's the double loop we made, or the self-locking snare, tight down around that wire. And it is not letting go. Alright guys, well, that does it for this video. A very down and dirty video on a last-ditch winter survival kit that we can fit inside our coffee can with a bunch of different items inside and a few other techniques on how to use those items. I try to include something new or something different in all of my videos, so I hope you took something new away or something different on how to incorporate those items in your own survival kit and then how to use them effectively in a survival situation. But I hope you guys like this video. If you did like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment in the comment section. I always appreciate your feedback. I want to thank you guys for everything you do for me, for all your likes, your views, your subscriptions, your comments, your feedback, and your shares. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.